have with me author Gemma Liviero, and Gemma's new book, well, it's a year old actually, but this is her newest book, is called Broken Angels. And I love this book so much, Gemma. Oh my God. And just so everybody knows, I had to like beg and plead Gemma to come on to convince her that this was going to be a good idea, because I loved her book that much. I just was not going to give up. I was going to say whatever I had to say to get you on here to talk about this.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Michelle. It is lovely to be talking to you. Finally, it really is.
Well, you know, you're all the way in Australia. I'm in Pennsylvania. You are the furthest person. I've talked to some people in London, but you are definitely the furthest away person that I have talked to so far. And it just seems like we're just, you know, in the same state. Doesn't even seem...
I know. It's wonderful. These modern, well, they're not modern anymore, are they?
But, no, but it feels pretty modern for me.
It does feel pretty modern for me too, because I'm not used to doing this. So, yeah.
Well, I have to tell you that my favorite genre is historical fiction. Okay. But I do love history books. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I really can get into a good history book that reads like a novel. But I love historical fiction too, because I'm a homeschooling mom. I have 6 children that I have homeschooled, and I have learned through the process that when you give a child a historical fiction book, sometimes the history books are a little too get caught up in the detail of some of the things, but a historical fiction, a child will sit down and read, and they will learn without thinking that they're having to learn dates or facts, but it gives them the sense of like what it was like. And Broken Angels, I have read a lot of historical fiction books from World War II, and I'm sure you have too. And it's kind of hard to make them different, you know, because there is so much out there. But you did it, okay? You did it. This book was amazing, and you did it from a totally different perspective. And I read it in record time. I can't even tell you. It took me a couple of hours at most. And I kind of went over it again today just to freshen my mind up on it. But, I mean, the way you wove... Okay, so for everybody, I'll explain it a little bit, and then you can explain it a little bit. I'll explain my part of it, is that you take these 3 characters, and about 3/4 of the way through the book, all their lives have come together. And they're 3 completely different characters, and yet it works so magically as they come together and go through a horrific ordeal. And so I'd like to hear from your, like, what was your thought process in coming up with those characters?
Okay, well, they evolved very slowly. And I think, you know, you bring up an important part about historical fiction and children and how they connect to stories. And it's really good, and I'll just go back on that point first, because you were saying that, you know, once they start reading a book, they get involved in the history of it. And the other thing is they, you know, they will go and research, then do their own research once they read those books. And that's the beautiful part of historical fiction. And then they'll go to those wonderful historians who have provided so much material and research, and they will look that up. And that's what happened to me. You know, I mean, I started loving historical fiction, and then I wanted to know more about it, and then I, you know, did more research, and the more stories that I read, you know, and reading about people and how they had to survive and the sacrifice they made, and that was where my characters came from. So in a story, so, you know, I read various parts of history, and, you know, I thought, what if I could bring all these people together? What if I could join them somehow? So that they're all sort of on the same page, you know, they're all part of the same fight. And it was, you know, and I think the thing about characterization is if I need to connect to the characters in order to, you know, remember the story. I mean, the books that I remember most, more than the story, is the characters and the relationships that they build together. So Willem's character really came from the idea of, you know, I read something about a doctor who didn't particularly want to be where he was, didn't want to be doing what he did. He still did some things, you know, but he questioned it. And I think ultimately some prisoners at the end actually spoke up for him, and so that, he did try to make things so much better for them. So that's where the idea came for that. So in amongst all the badness that was happening, there were some people in there who were thinking, I don't really agree with this, but, that's not to say they still didn't do some bad things, and we can't take that away. The second thing for Matilda was, about after the war, I also read about finding lost children and how children had to, I think there was about something like only 10% of children that were taken during the war ever were returned to their parents because there weren't records, there was nothing to tie them. That was the idea for Matilda. And, of course, Elsie, I'd read a lot about the ghettos and everything like that, and I tried to sort of understand what it would be like to actually be in there and walk in her shoes. And then, like I said before, I wanted to bring all these characters together and have them as part of the same fight for the story. I do take a lot to build my characters up, but I really want people to get to know them. And that's probably why I spend a lot of time on the characters, on each of the characters, especially in this book.
Yeah, and I, like I said, I've read a lot of, there's a lot of historical fiction out there about World War II, but when you can find a story from a different perspective, and I think I know the doctor that you're talking about that had a story out, I don't know if it was that he did specifically what this doctor did, but I knew there was one who came out that they found out about in the 50s or something that, was actually trying to help. And what you like to see is that they have a heart. And I love that you wrote it in first person for each character so that you could see what they were going through on their own, because each one of them could have been a book. I mean, that's what I think. Each one of them separately could have been a book, and yet you wove them together to create this one book. And the other thing is that to make Matilda and Elsie different enough that, because you take two female characters but with completely different backgrounds and different ages, but still having the same kind of loss of their families and still trying to work through that. And of course I love the ending, but we won't talk about the ending, but you have to read it to talk about
no spoilers. Hey.
Yeah, we're not doing spoilers. I don't do spoilers. And but it's just I just felt like, well, Elsie kind of had my heart. Like, I think she really, I really related to her.
You could really relate to her then.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah, I did, because I don't know. It was from a completely different perspective of anything that I'd ever heard before. And so therefore I think I fell in love with her story, and like you said, to spend a lot of time researching the ghetto part of, and that's a lot of what we don't know about. I mean, we don't know what it was like inside, I think I've read some stuff about it, but I got some way different. You brought up some great things that I didn't even know about. Like, it was way more horrific than I would have even imagined, than we can even imagine. And
it is, and it is hard to actually bring that into a book because, in our how we live in our civilized societies, it's very hard to imagine, isn't it? I mean, to actually put yourself back then in a place, that is so dark, that is so hopeless. So you have to sort of really stretch your imagination to grasp that these people actually lived during that time and had to actually go through that. It's really hard to imagine when we just walk around doing our daily stuff. So I really wanted to bring that into the story to make sure that people could feel something there, could have some sort of understanding of what it was like.
Yeah,
the real.
Yeah,
thing.
And I don't know that I've ever understood before that they were actually using the women as experiments. I think I've read a little bit about it, but the way you went into it, I was like, wow. I mean, I did not understand the extent that they were using women and using them as using them as their, getting them pregnant and using them as like that. And then those women would end up pregnant and have nothing, like they're starving. They're starving themselves, and their families are starving. And, as a woman, it's like, you can't even imagine that, when you're worrying about feeding your children and feeding, that's another thing is like, as a mom, both of those moms I felt for, like Matilda's mom who had to like totally turn away, turn off her emotions to save her. It's like,
yes,
we
that's
can't even
right.
imagine
That's exactly that. You've obviously caught it really well, Michelle. You've obviously read the book and understand it because you've caught exactly what I was trying to convey, which is exactly that, the things that you have to do to keep everyone safe. It's not, again, people can say, I could never do that, or I'd never do that, but you don't know until you're there, because you want all your children to survive. You want to survive. You want everyone around you to survive. So it's it's great that you've actually brought that up because it's so true.
Yeah. And this is your fourth book, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So I thought so. I just wanted to make sure before I said it. But this is your fourth book, and just so everybody can see, I mean, this cover is just absolutely beautiful. I mean,
the designer did an amazing job, didn't she? It's a really beautiful, beautiful cover. I was so pleased when it was sent to me, and there was never any question because normally you get some choices, and as soon as I saw that, I thought that is just it. She's just captured it well.
Yeah, and even this is the one right before it, Pastel Orphans. I mean, I love that. Even though they're not a sequel story, I love that your books have this kind of look to them that you can be like, those are your books. They're different, but they're a lot. I don't know, like the style. I love how your publisher did that.
There's something similar there, isn't there?
Yeah,
they're very different. Stories and story covers. There is a sort of a theme that I seem to be accepting, seem to be liking, awesome. Kind of thing.
And you know what? As a reader, when you're in a bookstore and you see them all, like I love when that stands out like that. You know what I mean? Like it's like your books, even if they aren't series books, it's like those are yours and that's your style and that's it says you. It's like your brand. I love that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that feedback. That's really important. I'm actually going to pass that on because it's good. And I'll remember that for the next one too.
Well,
keep that going.
Yeah, I like, the reason I do this is because I'm one of those weird readers that, I get into every part of the book. Like it isn't just about, the reading part. It's like, I love how they look. I love covers. I love everything about books. So I'm like, I can tell that because I've watched a couple of your YouTubes, a few of them, and you really are passionate about books, and that's why I did really want to talk to you because it's lovely to talk to people who love books. Yes. It really is. Yes, I do. I love books so much. So I want to talk about you. Like I want to see like what brought you. Like your writing is so beautiful, so beautiful. I was there. As I'm reading it, and that's what I love about books. And I think everybody does. It's an escape. It's a place to be. And I was right there with each one of these characters. And I read on your Amazon page that you were always a storyteller, but
storyteller.
Yeah, but it's like to get to this kind of writing, like did you go to college for creative writing, or did you or is it just a natural gift that you woke up and just have?
Well, I've always written from a very early age. I was really into poetry as a young child. It's really depressing poetry because I think I was in my teenage years. But I was very much into poetry, and then I was into short stories. And I loved sort of very strange, trying to create a mood. Sort of an eerie, creepy mood. I went through that period as well. And I just love telling stories too, even telling stories to people and making things up. And friends will tell you that, I had a big imagination. I did used to make up a lot of stories. There's a quote somewhere that says, as a child, you're a liar. As a adult, you're a storyteller. Somebody said that quote somewhere. I can't remember who it is, but it's so true. You make things as a child, and people sort of say, oh, you don't tell stories, but when you grow up and do it, everyone wants to sort of, you develop that, and everyone wants to hear them then. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just, as I said, I like to start with the characters. I think I have an idea of where I want to go to, and then then I bring back the characters, and so I have sort of tried various genres. I did study as well. I was writing before that, and then I was studying. Then while I was studying, I wrote the first 2 books, which was sort of set back in more kind of fantasy style. But in the back of my head, because I had always, read war stories and non-fiction, in the back of my head, I always thought that I would ultimately write a book like that one day. I'm going back sort of 20 years, and I always had the thought then. And I grew up with parents who talked a lot about war, who had their own war experiences. And a grandfather in war, and so it was always a topic, that was always brought up. The little things were brought up, and that would sort of set an idea in my head, and I'd sort of think, down the track, I'm going to write about that. I had books of notes, and I would write sort of lots of things that, I thought that would make a good story. Some of the things I sort of write are things that I had an idea about a long time, and then I suddenly remember that I read something somewhere, and then I'd go back to that and go, what was that about in that book, that triggered my thoughts and my imagination. And so, it's sort of been a long process to get to the characters that I have. I think and I think your writing sort of changes a little bit over time. I certainly bring a lot more history into the book, because I think you said it's a way to escape, but I think to escape and learn at the same time is lovely. And that's what I love about historical fiction, because you get a bit of both.
Absolutely. I think that you're right. I think I know that's why I'm a big history person. And it's like it takes me there. And then it's also like I'm learning about things that I didn't know about, no matter how many times I've read historical fiction about World War II. But when you say that your family was connected, I was wondering, because are they from Australia also? Or are you not from?
My mother's English.
Your mom's English, okay.
And she was in the Women's Royal English Navy. So my father was a pilot, and they met on a ship on the way to Australia, which is a really lovely story.
Yes.
So they had a bit of background. My mum was evacuated in the war, during the war, from London because of the bombing. So they had some experiences of their own, and so as small children we hear those things, and we grow up with I grew up with those things, and so that was part of the inspiration as well, is learning amazing. A lot from them.
Yeah, that's awesome, because I really don't have. I think I had an uncle or something. I really don't have any connection to World War II. If I did, then nobody told me about it. So, that's when you said that, I was like, I bet you're English. I bet that was from the English side. I had a feeling that was the deal. So that's, to grow up and hear those stories, and that in itself, what a love story is that? That would make a great book.
Yeah, well, it was, my father was a bomber pilot, and his plane was actually shot down. So he was on the way back to Australia when they met. So, and I think even as a child, sort of you hear those stories and you run around and hear them, but they're not that important because they're your parents.
Right.
And then as you get older, you get a real appreciation of things. And, I grew to love hearing about that story and other things, and other people's stories as well.
Yes. Yes, that's beautiful. I love that. So can you talk a little bit about what you're working on right now? Give us a little bit of a teaser.
I'll tell you a little bit, okay. Not too much.
As much as you can.
It's just about there too. It's actually completed, and these are sort of the final little editing bits that I'm doing, because as an author, I don't think you ever feel like you've truly finished. Even when I sort of pass this one on, I'm going to, worry about it and everything. But anyway, it's sort of set in roughly the same time period, but it's a bit of back and forth. It's told third person this time, but it's told, present, but present back in that time and past a little bit earlier. So it's and it's more of a mystery. It's a very different book again. It's got probably a very different feel. I've tried to do something a little bit different, but again, there's several characters in it, and hopefully they're all very different. they're all from very different backgrounds and different childhood experiences, and I think that's all I can say without saying too much, giving too much away.
Do you have an idea of when it's going to come out?
No, I don't. At this stage, I'm still in the final stages, so I'm still doing the editing, and I know there's probably going to do. I always find something that I want to change. I like to think that it would be out, early next year, but it depends on how quickly I feel like I've completed it. You get to when you've had a couple of books out and you see what can go wrong, and the errors come up, and you start getting a little even fussier. Than I thought I was fussy before, but I'm even fussier now.
Well, absolutely. I think every book always. I was interviewing an author the other day, and he said, "I think this is my best book," and he's like, "I hope that's the way it goes anyway." He's like, "I would hate to go the other way, Like, I hope they get better as they go, Are you?
It's really hard to say. I mean, it's really hard to judge your own book too, because you're right in the thick of it, and you're writing it, and then originally you're writing there's a story, and then when you by the 11th time that you've read it, it's no longer a story. It's like, what have I got to fix, or what have I got to find? And you're so close to it. And what I say to people, what I recommend to people is just to put it down for a couple of weeks and then go back to it with new eyes.
Right.
I mean, we're often in a rush to finish it.
Right.
And I think that's probably the mistake, is in a rush to get it out there, finish it, get it off, get onto something new.
Yes. Yeah. I used to write a little bit of a blog back in the day, and I used to do the same thing. Like, I would write, and then I'd think, oh, that's so horrible. And then, I'd go back a month later and read it and go, oh, that's not as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Yes, that's true, yes.
Yeah, even though mine was about present-day stuff and children and things, but I would think at the time that I didn't like it. But then after some time had gone by, I was like, oh, all right, well, that's not that bad. It's not as bad as I thought it was, But so are you one of those authors that outlines the whole thing and then fills it in, or do you just sit down and write?
I am a little bit like that. I do have a goal when I sit down to write my books. There's a goal. There's where do I want this book to take people? How am I going to? How do I want to finish it? How do I want it? Without actually writing the ending, I do have some idea of how I want the book to, where I want it to progress to, and then I start working on my characters and building them up. And then the story flows. And then sometimes you always go back and change a little bit, because you read it and you go, well, I didn't really like that direction, and I might change it. But I am a bit of an outliner. I don't just sit down with a pen and write the first line and then go from there. No, I do have a good idea, and I really want to spend time building the characters.
Right. And it's always interesting to me as the reader that I interview authors who are like, no, I don't outline. I sit down. I write it out. I don't do. And both ways work. I mean, there's not a right or wrong. It's how your mind works. So that's why I always ask, because I always want to know, I don't know. To me, it's like, wow. And, there's some people that can really just outline it out and nothing's a surprise. And then there are other people that are halfway through the book, I have no idea how it's going to end. I'm like, how do you do that? How do you not know by halfway through the book how it's going to end? And he's like, oh, I just let the characters tell me. And I'm like, wow, that is crazy. I mean, it's awesome, but, it's also crazy.
Yeah, that's so right. So, I mean, it doesn't matter how you write the book. I think that, as long as you're you're writing something that people might want to read, or something that you feel comfortable writing, then it doesn't really matter, does it? I've read things where people say, "Oh no, this is how you should do it,"
right?
And especially sort of they teach you, a certain method of putting a book together.
Yeah.
But sometimes just different ways work. Something unusual works. And I often read about authors who just pick up a pen and start writing, and I think that's amazing that they can do that.
Yes.
To me, that's fairly gifted. So I don't think there's any right or wrong. I just think that whatever works for you, and if the readers are liking it, then
right.
It's working out for everyone.
Well, I want to show your cover again. I want everybody to go get this book. I will be promoting this book. I put it on all my social media. When I release your video, I will be putting this book out there. It is an amazing book, Gemma. I am so happy that I finally got to talk to you, because I just wanted to tell you, I love just telling authors, like, I loved your book, okay? I loved this book, and I bought like 5 copies, just so you know, and I passed them out. So,
oh,
well, I know a lot of people who read, and I know a lot of homeschooling moms, and I know kids in school, and I'm like, and this is good for high school kids. I am promoting this for high school kids. I think it's perfectly appropriate. They're learning about it in school anyway. They're learning about history, and they can add it to their reading list of whatever program they're working on. And I love when I find a book like that, and I just start passing it around to everybody. So.
Very kind. Thank you very much. It's fantastic to get your feedback.
Yeah, I cannot wait till your next book. Please tell me, and you can come on and we'll talk about it and keep updated on your.
For sure.
Yeah, when it's official, and I'd like to keep I keep it going so that we can always talk about your new stuff. So it would be awesome.
Thank you again. Thank you.
Yes. So everybody, I will be putting her website down here. You have an amazing website. I always ask at the end, like, so what book tours are you doing? I don't think you're coming to the States to do book tours, so,
I was in the States last year, and I was thinking of coming out in June, but I'm not sure if I can get there this year.
Yeah, it's a trip.
Yeah, it is. It is a bit of it, and I have a daughter too in grade 12. It's her final year, so it's my last one, so I want to sort of make sure I'm here for that. But yeah, I do want to.
Eventually.
I do want to go to the States, and it will definitely be next year. I'll be coming out next year.
Awesome.
That is a definite.
Awesome. Well, keep us in touch, please, and you just keep writing. I will encourage you to keep writing so I can keep reading your stuff. But thank you so much. Thank you for figuring this out for me. It wasn't easy, but we did it, and I am so grateful for you, to make the effort to talk to me. I am forever grateful. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon, Gemma.
It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Yes, thank you. We'll have a nice day.
Thanks. Yeah, have a nice evening.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye.